Like I'm ready for Star Wars. But again, very difficult to define. Lots of different types, meaning different things to different people, but often giving us a huge sense of meaning in our life. Right? And being a very big like driving force for meaning. And as I mentioned, I want to talk for a moment about the role that attachment plays in terms of love. And I don't think these are in your slides. Sorry, I added them on my end. But this is a really big thing right now. And there was a popular book that came out called Attached. I'll pass it around in case you want to take a look at it. I've read it and everything, but I'll go hand it around to you. It's a book that came out pretty recently and is really starting to talk about this idea of your attachment style with your primary caregiver as a child, as an infant, as a baby, oftentimes dictates who you will fall in love with and be in relationships with as an adult. As frightening as this sounds, you often find partners that mimic your parents, right? And you can like shake your head at that in a way, but it's often true. The relationships that last and that work have just enough familiarity with your attachment style to persist. Now, they can't be like an exact replica, obviously, but if they have enough familiarity in the way that you were loved and treated as a child, oftentimes those relationships are more successful. And so what we see is that there are kind of four main attachment styles, and they sometimes go by different names. Like sometimes we'll have anxious or preoccupied, avoidant or dismissive, disorganized or fearful avoidant. But in general, it's these four. And kind of the gold standard is the first one. Secure attachment means that you have an ability to build healthy, long-lasting relationships. As a child, you felt safe, you felt understood, and you felt comforted in early interactions, right? So as a baby, your parents gave you a sense of, or like parents, it doesn't have to be both, but some caregiver gave you a sense of safety in the world, that they would be there, that your needs would be met, right? And so if you have a secure attachment, it tends to correlate back to that. Yeah. It's not, right? I added it. So I'll add it on Canvas. Yeah, I added it in. So I'll make sure to add it on Canvas. Okay. Anxious attachment style is defined by fears of rejection and abandonment. People who are anxiously attached often need a lot of validation. They kind of tend to be a little bit codependent, right, in the way that they are as a lover and also as an attachment style. This tends to come from very inconsistent parenting. Parents who weren't attuned to your needs. They didn't meet your needs consistently. And so you form what is known as like an anxious or preoccupied attachment style, where you have a lot of fear of rejection with your partner. You constantly need validation. You are a little bit like clingy and codependent with them. And that can work, obviously, right? But it's often very based on what happened when you were little. Avoidant or dismissive, I've heard it both ways, is when people tend to kind of avoid or not give as much like physically and emotionally. They tend to like be a little bit more uncomfortable with that level of intimacy. They might be a little more independent or like want more space. Doesn't tend to go great with somebody who's very codependent and needs like a lot, but obviously can be worked out. Tends to come from having caregivers that were very absent or maybe emotionally distant or harsh, strict, right, when you were younger. And then disorganized or fearful avoidant is when you have very inconsistent behavior. You're kind of inconsistent. It's disorganized. And it tends to come with like an inability to trust other people, a hard time trusting that things are going to be okay, that someone's going to be loyal to you and stay with you. And it tends to come from very inconsistent caregivers. They were sometimes sources of comfort and other times sources of fear, right? And so it leads to a disorganized behavior in you because your caregiver was disorganized and inconsistent as a child. So we tend to form this attachment style like in the first year of life. As we're forming these relationships and connections with a caregiver, this forms, and then it tends to be something that then affects our relationships and who we're drawn to as an adult. And really interesting in that book that I handed out to you, that book called Attached, they talk a lot about how to navigate some of the pitfalls that come between combinations of attachment styles, right? So myself, right, I am a very like disorganized attachment style. This is where I fall. And but like somewhere between anxious and disorganized. I'm like right in there. And my partner is very avoidant. And so sometimes that causes a lot of issues for us, right? I'm very like I said, I'm like very Velcro and needy and like dependent. And my partner is very like, I need my space. Right. But we can navigate that as long as we're aware of it. And the cool thing about this book is it kind of goes into how to navigate those pitfalls, right? And what dynamics can come up and what issues can come up. And as a side note, I put this link here, right? So if you have a computer, a tablet, a phone, whatever, go to this website really quickly. I found a really cool, free and quick attachment style quiz. How many of you know your attachment style? Like off the top of your head? Fair number of you, right? So let's go to this site together. It looks like this. I brought it up here as well. Okay, so when you're on this website, you just click take the quiz, right? And it's going to bring up some questions and try to think about how you have to pick a stance. And you're going to do this later with me as well. But you can think about the relationship you're in right now, specifically, if you're in a relationship, or you can think about a past relationship, or kind of how you tend to be in general. But you need to pick one and be consistent all the way through. So like for me, I would think about my current relationship and I would answer these questions based on the relationship I'm in right now. But it could be a past one and how you are in general. But I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. It's very quick. It's like 3 minutes to take this. So again, here's the website up here, or it was on the slide. Some of you I saw taking a picture. But go through it, take the quiz really quickly, and it'll give you your results at the end. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Yeah, it is. So here, let me go back. It's right here. You have the link. And again, those slides aren't on Canvas, but I could go add them real quickly. But here's the website right here. We're taking this quiz right here. Were you all able to get to it okay? I feel like And then when you're done, it'll ask you for your like name and email, but then it gives you your results. And it gives you a percentage for each of the four. So I'll give you another minute or two. I just finished, so.
Yeah. No idea. It's my regular good sign. What I grew up with versus what I'm trying to do. I didn't know what to do.
Did you get results? And we get a result? What do you think? Accurate, not accurate? Mine was really different today. Your mood a little bit obviously affected. Mine today said I'm 92% anxious. I was like, was I feeling anxious when I answered it today? I don't know. But how many of you agree with your result for the most part? What? Someone? How many of you agree with the result? Anyone like completely disagree? Okay, so obviously any test, don't let any test ever tell you, right? This is a very informal test, but there are tons of these online. And what I liked about this one is they don't give you one attachment style. They give you kind of a breakdown of where you fall with all of them. Because typically people kind of have a dominant style, but then they have other ones that they can tap into, right? So you might have moments where you prefer your independence and you have a little bit of avoidant tendencies, but you're more dominated by like being secure. Right. And so you can have a little bit of each, and typically your partner will have a little bit of each. And sometimes you can kind of tap into those other sides. So mine was 4% secure. I was like, that's really sad, right? 4%. I was like, thanks, mom and dad, 4%. Mostly anxious and disorganized. Right. And my partner, as I said, is very strongly avoidant. And so it doesn't mean that it's a problem if you're different. You just have to navigate that. Right. And again, I thought that book was really interesting for kind of giving strategies on that. But any kind of general reactions or thoughts? I know some of you already knew, but any reactions, thoughts, anything? Yeah.
My friend's family, they found out what attachment styles were, and they're like, "You're good at psychology. What is this?" And they had me literally explain the entire thing to them. And
okay.
Obsessed about it. And I took one too, and I got the one I expected. But turns out I'm a little more secure than I had anticipated. I'm not sure what that's about.
Okay. Right. And again, like every test is going to give you like a slightly different result, but I mean, secure is like the gold standard, right? That's what you would ideally like to be. And you can change your attachment style over time. What's interesting is if you've been with somebody a long time, you might kind of gravitate toward each other's attachment styles, which can be interesting how you can change and your relationship can kind of supersede these, but we are drawn toward people that are somewhat similar to our parents. Yeah. Yeah.
I went to dinner with them all and I sat down at the table and my friend's dad goes, "So what's your attachment style?" And I was like, happy conversations.
Right. Sure. Starting nice and light there. I like that. Right. Yeah. I mean, the fact that people are more aware of it though is kind of nice. Like this is a really big area. Like there's a lot of research behind this because attachment style can translate to not only like who you love, but a lot of mental health issues as well. Like I teach abnormal psych before this, and this is very linked to a lot of issues related to like trauma and safety and things along those lines too. So a lot of support for this idea. And again, it can very easily shape who you fall in love with and the dynamic in your relationship. And I'd recommend that book if you're looking for like learning a little bit more. There is even a quiz in there. It's kind of similar to the one you took. You can take a picture of it and take it on your own later if you wanted to. But there's lots of different types of love, and they're kind of based on different theories related to this topic. And so a lot of like overlap and clashing between them. But let's talk about some of the different theories and types of love that can result or that we can observe. One very, very basic distinction, and this is overly simplistic, but it's one that we make a lot, is romantic and passionate love or companionate and conjugal love. Romantic and passionate love, we would call infatuation. You could actually argue that in the very beginning of a relationship, you're not in love with that person, you're infatuated with that person, right? And that's something that like we tend to use that word quite a bit because there's a lot of intensity in the very beginning of a relationship. All you can do is think about that person, right? They make you feel complete, right? Yeah, you have a lot of desire for them. You avoid conflict. The first like 3 to 6 months of a relationship tends to be very passionate and very strong. And then you need to make a transition in order for it to last, right? Our body can actually not keep up the chemicals that are released when we fall in love with someone. And so what happens is as those fade, people have their first fights, they start to get to know each other, and they either make it through that or they don't, right? And so when you make it through to the next stage, we call that companionate or conjugal love, where you have like an affection and an attachment for this person. There's familiarity and you accept their shortcomings and love them for who they are. This is much more enduring, but you still have to find ways to bring passion in if that's something that's important in your relationship dynamic. So kind of a very overly simplistic model, but that we start out very romantic and passionate, and we have to transition to more of a companionate or conjugal love as a relationship goes on. Another like very popular theory is the triangular theory. It adds one more layer. So this one we talk about passion, intimacy, and commitment being the 3 different components of love. And this was something that was popularized by a man named Robert Sternberg. And so he said that we can have these different types of love that emerge based on which of these elements we have present. That in the beginning, passion is going to be really strong, but it's going to fade, right? So in the beginning, when we have just passion, that would be infatuation. You know, we're infatuated and obsessed with someone. And that we can have intimacy and commitment that start to build, right? So different types of these elements or different combinations lead to different types of love. And he put this one as like the gold standard in the middle, right? You want consummate love where you have intimacy, passion, and commitment to the person that you're with. So you can have just liking someone. Maybe this is a friendship where you have a degree of emotional intimacy, but no passion, right? And so it kind of starting to account for different ways that we can love people and how different components can add up to create different types of love. One other really popular theory, and this one has gained a lot of popularity in the last like 5-10 years, is the idea of like the colors of love. That there are 6 different kind of dynamics or ways that we can end up loving someone. And again, we tend to do better with complementary love styles, right? So if you have someone who's a very practical lover, they might not do so great with like someone who's like a game playing lover, right? And some people do like to play the game of love, right? And other people are much more practical, like it's a shopping list if I'm looking for these qualities. And I have a little inventory, and this is one that I put together, but I actually have it on paper because it's a little more to do. And so I'm going to give this to you. And just like with the last one, what I want you to think about, you have to again choose the relationship you're in now, kind of how you are in general, or you could think about past relationship. Just commit to one stance if you want to get the most accurate results. And you're not turning this in, this is just for you. I think I might actually hide this from the I was taking that attachment because I was like, no, I don't like to share my keep this list and those things. So I have a copy of this and I always feel like I maliciously destroy it after the review. But anyway. Okay, so what you're gonna do is go through each statement and you're just gonna rank it with the statements that are on here. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 are your score. And then you'll add up your total score for each type of love. And again, make a commitment now. Are you even thinking about one relationship, how you are in general, past relationships? It's up to you.
I think you know, I do what I want, I thought it was something that you would like this weather,
Yeah,
or that you were gonna comment.
I do like this weather. It's much better than the super hot weather. Did everyone get one? Okay, so read each statement and then you're gonna, 5 if you strongly agree, 1 if you disagree, right? And kind of everywhere in the middle. And then you'll get a total score for each type of love at the bottom. So add up each score as you go along. So pick a stance. So you can pick like a relationship you're in now. You can pick a past relationship, or you can pick how you would like be in general, or what your ideal would. Just you have to just choose one of those stances for that. So again, when you finish each section, make sure you add up your total for each type of love. We can talk a little more about what you. You're never even everything we're talking about. You're still adding or taking, totally fine, keep going, but in general, so this is a really informal, right? So for each type of love, you'll end up with a score somewhere between 5, if you ranked every single one of them at a 1, right? Somewhere between I'm sorry, I guess it would be 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're like, oh no, I don't have that look. So it'd be 7 to 35. Right, so for each one, the lower the score, the less like you that type of love tends to be. So if you have a 7 or anything under like 15, that type of love doesn't tend to fit you very well. It's not very representative of you. The higher the type or the higher the score, the more closely it resembles you. Right? How many of you have like one dominant type? Does anyone have like one like high score? Okay, anyone have like 2 or 3 that are pretty close? Yeah, that's pretty common too. Anyone have one that's like, oh, that's clearly not me, right? It's really low, right? That's mine. I have one of those too. So mine, I have 3 that are the exact same. Eros, mania, and agape. So I am romantic, crazy, but selfless. That's my saving quality, I hope, right? But if you have a couple of them that are really close, that means you have multiple colors of love, multiple love styles, and that's pretty common. And so again, it's just for fun, just kind of informal, but the idea here is that there are different types of love, and that certain types of love tend to do better together, just like the attachment styles. It's kind of a similar thread. I will put out there, I always say this with hesitation, but I will do it anyway. I have some extra copies. If you would like to take one to give to a partner, you are more than welcome to do so, but I am not responsible for what happens after it, okay? This was like 9 years ago. I gave a version of this to someone who asked for it. She gave it to her boyfriend and they broke up. And I would argue that that was clearly coming no matter what, right? One little inventory wouldn't do it. But ever since then, I'm like scared to give it out. So if you give it to someone, give it to them with the openness and awareness that it could lead to conversation or whatever. And so if you're interested, I will leave them out. And if you are not, then just leave it, right? I'm always afraid to offer that, but they're there if you'd like them. Are there any like comments, anything like in general about your results? What do you think? Agree, disagree? It's a lot of like nodding. Again, really informal, but I do think that it gives you a good opportunity to see where you fall in these. And what's really common is that people have like one that's really not right for me, right? And so like for me, like game playing, like that's like my score was 8, right? Like really, really low. And then my other ones were kind of fun. Some other things about falling in love. A really big piece of falling in love, and this might take some of the romance out of it, but a really big piece of falling in love is there's a lot of chemical stuff happening when we fall in love with someone. There is a lot happening in our body and in our brain when we meet someone that we are infatuated with, that we are drawn to, that we're falling in love with. And what's interesting about these is I think it helps to understand this process, because there are natural highs and lows that come with this process. And sometimes we can interpret them in a very different way rather than just understanding that it's chemistry. So when we meet someone that we're drawn to or that we're like becoming infatuated with, there's a lot of neurotransmitters and hormones that course through our body. And so some of these, right, and we talked about some of these before, but norepinephrine, which the equivalent as a hormone would be adrenaline, but so norepinephrine courses through our system when we are meeting someone that makes us excited, nervous, have some of those feelings of love, right? And so this can cause us to have things like our palms get sweaty, right? Like we get sweaty palms, our heart starts beating really quickly, your mouth gets dry, which makes it hard to swallow, you're nervous. These things happen when you're scared and nervous just as much as they do when you are in love with someone. You also get a feeling called butterflies in the stomach. Now, butterflies in the stomach, I'll come back to this. Just as a side note, again, let me take the like romance out of this feeling here. The butterflies in the stomach, that fluttery feeling in your stomach that you get when you're nervous, when you're excited, when you are falling in love, all that is physically is all of the blood flow in your gut is being diverted, right? And so what happens is as your intestines pull away, it creates this tingly feeling, which we call butterflies in the stomach. That's all it is. It's caused by norepinephrine, right? It's caused by your sympathetic nervous system and norepinephrine and hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. As your body prepares to face a threat, because that feeling is a threat of sorts, right? That fight or flight response, all of that blood flow gets diverted as your intestines pull away, creates a weird feeling that we call fluttering butterflies in the stomach. Okay, so that's that's what's going on in your body when you feel that sensation, very connected to norepinephrine, right? That neurotransmitter that causes sweating, your heart racing, dry mouth, and so on. Dopamine and serotonin also play a really big role in falling in love with someone. Dopamine has a lot to do with like focused attention and desperation. When you are falling in love with someone, they are all you can think about, right? You are like desperate to be around them. You tend to have a lot of feelings of like euphoria. You can't sleep because they're on your mind, right? Those are all things that are really common. Focused attention comes a lot from dopamine. Serotonin plays a really big role in obsession and craving. When you meet someone that you're infatuated with, you crave being with them. You're obsessed with them in the beginning. That's really, really common. And so you have this feeling of like, you can't think of anyone else. That's all that's on your mind. Phenylethylamine, or PEA, is another neurotransmitter that plays a role here. It's found in certain foods too, like chocolate. And so what's interesting is we get this idea of aphrodisiacs that we'll talk about in a later chapter that are connected to this substance called phenylethylamine. Nothing actually works in the way that we expect it to, but we'll talk about the placebo effect in that when we get there. Oxytocin, we've talked about before. It's the cuddle hormone. It gives you that rush feeling, right? It's released when you hold hands with someone, when you touch someone, when you cuddle with them. It's released during orgasm, during childbirth. It plays a big role in like physical bonding with another person. We also release endorphins, which tend to make us feel good and feel this like natural rush and high. So when you meet someone new and you're kind of interested in them or infatuated with them, this is coursing through your body at an incredible rate. And your body cannot keep that up for more than about 3 months, which is why a lot of relationships end at the 3-month mark, right? So relationships start out really strong and you're going with all of this. You might not even know that person yet. I love them. They're the perfect person for me. You know nothing about them. Right? You're still meeting them. You're still learning them. But a lot of those feelings are driven by this. There's nothing wrong with that, but they will start to fade. And when they start to fade, people are like, oh, see, we weren't meant to like be together, and we don't have that chemistry anymore. Well, the chemistry is coming from within you, right? And so you have to find ways to create these feelings and create these rushes and keep this alive in order to have the relationship persist. But I think understanding that there are chemical changes that happen around the 3 to 7 month mark, and again around the 3-year mark. A lot of relationships break up at these points that have a correlation with chemistry and also expectations that come with the length of time you've been together. So just kind of an interesting side note, some things that will naturally boost these things as a side note as well. This is a perfect time of year for boosting these things, right? If you go to something scary, like that feeling of fear, releases all the same stuff. Right. So if you take like a date to like Halloween Horror Nights or something scary like that, or a scary movie, you're going to get rushes of these things that can facilitate a closer connection very quickly. Roller coasters kind of have the same effect. Anything that puts you in a little bit of danger, but it's also thrilling, exciting, or maybe even a little scary, will release all of these same things. And it's kind of a little like trick or a little hack that you can use to kind of encourage feelings of infatuation with someone that you're on a date with. So you're welcome, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. So trauma bonding is more like when you connect over like, things that have happened in your life that could cause a release of some of these things as well. That's more just like manipulating or like being aware of and using your chemistry in an advantageous way. But trauma bonding can bring two people together very quickly. Sometimes then what happens is when you get outside of that situation that brought you together, you don't have enough to stay together. But that is one way that people kind of connect very quickly. And especially given their attachment styles, they can connect even quicker if it's the right combination. Yeah.
In my intro psych class, we watched a study they did on people going on dates at a bungee jump or not.
Yeah, bungee jumping would be a good one.
And they tracked hormones in their brain.
Yeah. Right. And again, it's that level of like fear and excitement like that are happening together. And something about that, it mimics this. I mean, when you're anxious, period, you have these things happening, right? But when you add that element of fear and excitement, especially if it's like on a date, it can cause these things to course even stronger and kind of initially connect you a little quicker. Whether that lasts or not is up to you, but you can do these things. And it's also kind of a cool way to jumpstart it if they've faded. In a relationship over time, you find ways to boost these as well. I have a little video, kind of one of the experts in this field talking about this concept. It's just kind of a review of what I just said, but I'll play it for, I'll just share it anyway. Let me put that back. So again, kind of highlighting what I was just saying, right, that these things are very much influenced, right, and like very cranked up when you're falling in love with someone. She talked about the ventral tegmental area, or the VTA. It's a really big like dopamine reward circuit area in our brain. Dopamine, as we talked about, plays a really big role in falling in love with someone. That reward or like pleasure-driven feeling when you enjoy being around somebody that you are infatuated with. So a lot of chemistry. And I do have a little like homework assignment I'm going to give you related to this and a song, but I'll get back to that in a few minutes. Just a couple of other concepts. I'm sorry. Any questions or thoughts here before I keep going? I'm trying to get my kids to go to Halloween Horror Nights, but they're not ready yet. They're not ready. They're too scared. Soon, not to fall in love, but to get scared. All right. A couple other things about falling in love, and these seem really common sense, but there's something that we have noticed over and over and over again. There's 4 components that tend to correlate very strongly with attraction: proximity, reciprocity, similarity, and physical attractiveness. And again, these seem like relatively common sense, but we tend to fall in love with people who are a little bit similar to us. Not carbon copies, but similar. Now, you can have different interests and different like things that you enjoy doing, but common core values tend to be important, right? So if you're deeply religious, falling in love with somebody who is also like from a religious background tends to create better cohesion. Right, so having a degree of similarity, you have at least enough interests to keep you like connected and that you can share together. But attitudes, intellectual abilities, we tend to fall in love with people who are on a similar plane as us with those things. We tend to be attracted to or fall in love with people that are geographically close to us. This makes a lot of sense. It's people that you are close to or interact with. People that you see on a constant basis, you tend to have a greater likelihood of being drawn to them than people you don't see or that are far away. Makes complete sense. Reciprocity is also a big one. Reciprocity means balance. Right, so we tend to do best in relationships when there is a balance, a give and take. If one person is always giving or one person's always taking, those relationships don't tend to last. Now, it's okay if sometimes one person is giving more than they're taking, but having a degree of balance tends to be important. And then also somebody that we find to be physically attractive. And luckily, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so we all have different standards of what we find to be attractive. But we tend to be drawn to and enter into relationships with people that we find to be attractive. Right? And you can obviously grow to become like attracted to someone, but typically people have that right off of the bat. Yeah,
It's also true for, like friendships.
it could be on a lesser level. Yeah.
Well, more like when you're closer to someone and like you want to be friends with them,
Mhm.
and then you keep seeing that person, and you really become friends.
Right.
I think I learned that in my
Yeah.
social.
Yeah, it breeds familiarity, right? If you're constantly seeing people and interacting with them, it makes it much easier to have a friendship with them than someone that you're not seeing or not interacting. Yeah, and again, that kind of makes sense on like a common sense level that these things would be correlated to who you're with or who you're even friends with. One last thing here. So in terms of like maintaining relationships, right? So we talked about this a little bit with like the Gottman and Gottman like duo, but relationships that last tend to have these qualities to them. And you don't have to have them and you don't have to have all of them, but these are things that we kind of consistently see. You have good communication, right? And we talked about that in chapter 3, that having good communication is really a big part of relationships. You are companions. You see that person as your friend, right? So even though you're partners, even though you're romantic partners, you have like a friendship. It's not something mysterious. It's almost like a deep friendship that has evolved into more. You see them as your companion or your friend. You have realistic expectations and shared interests. Expectations get in the way a lot of our happiness or satisfaction with relationships and just life in general. But having shared interests, things that you can do together, is a big one. And this one right here is one of the most commonly correlated elements to success. You have frequent positive interactions with your partner. This could be laughing together, doing fun things together, but you have positive interactions, right? Whatever that might be. And those positive interactions maintain the relationship. You can face and deal with conflict together, right? Conflict is good, right? It's just how you deal with it and how you respond to it that can make it problematic. And you have sexual expression and variety, right? So these are things that all tend to kind of correlate with very strong, long-lasting, high-quality relationships. And again, you don't have to have all of them, but in general, they're things that we tend to see. And I was trying to find a clip of this of how to like maintain relationship satisfaction. And I kind of stumbled across something that I think was like related a little bit, talking about technology and relationships. So I'll play this for you and then we can go from there. Be a barrier too, right? And like one of them said, you know, we can be in the same bed together for long periods of time and not even talk to each other, right? And sometimes people need time to turn off and like have a break mentally, and it doesn't always have to be together. But I thought it was just kind of an interesting connection to relationship satisfaction. And some of them look so disappointed, like, I don't want to turn off my phone, right? And you don't necessarily have to. Like I said, I think I shared, my partner's obsessed with TikTok, like watches so much TikTok. And I just watch it with her, right? So like, because again, Velcro, right? That's me. But like, I'll watch it with her for an hour, and like, it's become a way that like we connect over it instead of doing our own things. And so that's another way that you can keep the technology and find a way to bring it together. So I have one last thing I want to kind of bring up here. I have a homework assignment for you to kind of bring in these layers of like falling in love and chemistry And so I'm gonna give you this piece of paper, and on the back of it, so it's the lyrics to a song, and I'm so sorry for putting this in your head. What I want you to do as we listen to this song is you can underline or like highlight things that stand out to you. You're gonna need to probably spend a little bit of time between now and Monday. Kind of talking about how it connects to these different neurotransmitters and hormones that we talked about today. So I'm looking to see that you can take some of the lyrics in the song and connect it to the chemistry of falling in love. And I think as much as the song is obnoxious, it's a great example of that. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, before we are done for the day, I'm gonna play the song and the video for you. And so as you're listening to it, feel free to kind of make notes or underline things to yourself. But there is a space on the back, where I gave you a space to kind of talk about how it connects to the specific things. And again, if you need to hear the song again, you can find it very easily online. Do you need one more?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great song.
Yeah.
It will definitely be in your head, and I'm so sorry for that. Okay, so let me play this for you.
Have you ever played the video?
Yeah, it's not complete without the video, right? And here we go.